I'm so glad summer is over and it's now turning into fall, and we're getting chillier weather. But what did I read for the last month of summer? Hello, welcome to my channel. Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg, and today I'm going to be giving you my reading report for August. All the books that I read, all the Kindle books that I read, and all the audiobooks that I listened to. I am going to not talk about every single book in this video because some of these books that I read or listened to, I discussed in some previous videos. My wrap-up for the big books of summer, and my discussion for some of the books that I read for Garbagest. Some of the books for Garbagest will be included in this video, but the ones I did previously, I'm not going to talk about again. I will leave a link in the description of this video to those two videos so you can see or watch every book that I read. So what did I actually read in August? I will be breaking down my categorization from the print books, my digital books, and then my audio books. In print, I read Fever Beach by Carl Hiaasen. Carl Hiaasen is a mystery crime writer from Florida, and he is absolutely hilarious. Fever Beach is his most recent publication. And Carl Hiaasen loves his native state of Florida. He hates developers. He hates politicians. He loves natural Florida. And that shows ever so much in many of his books and in Fever Beach. Now, in Fever Beach, you are introduced to a couple of characters. One is a white supremacist. He wants to be very big in the white supremacist groups, but he's gotten tossed out of the Proud Boys and other major organizations because on January 6th, he went to riot in Washington, D.C. He broke into the Capitol, and he wanted to smear feces on a bust of General Grant. However, he made a slight mistake. He smeared feces on the wrong bust. He smeared it on the feces of a Confederate general who was very much a white supremacist. So all the white supremacist groups don't want to have anything to do with this guy, so he starts his own group. Let's just say this man is not the best, he is not the brightest, he does not gather other people who are the best and the brightest to join his organization. But there is a corrupt politician running for Congress who is just a little bit like Matt Gaetz, I think. And he hires this man to do some nefarious deeds to try to fix the voting in an old folks' home. Let's just say things do not turn out as well as planned for this congressman. And then there's also a radical environmentalist. He's willing to do things not quite legal to protect the environment of Florida. And this book is absolutely hilarious. It does skew towards the political left. So if you're one of those people who really admire Donald Trump or the governor of Florida, you may not enjoy this book so much. But if you want some lighthearted reading that skewers the right wing, this is a book for you. For Garbagest, I read Doctor Who and the Day of the Daleks. This was originally published in the 70s. It features the Jon Pertwee Doctor Who character. Now, I watched the Jon Pertwee Doctor Who series way back in the 80s, and I kind of liked them. It is one of the older Doctor Who episodes. I actually grew up knowing Tom Baker as my first Doctor, but the Jon Pertwee series was okay. And this is, what I gather, a novelization of one of the television series. I probably saw that television series back in the 80s. I really don't remember it. But this book was kind of a letdown. I have not paid much attention to Doctor Who since Sylvester McCoy left as the Doctor, and the series went into a hiatus for a number of years. I have not watched any of the new Doctor Who episodes. And was it really hard for me to get back into the story of Doctor Who because my life has just progressed beyond Doctor Who. You really need to be an ardent fan of Doctor Who to enjoy this book. It has some of the characteristics of the TV show as I remember it, but as a novel that you just want to read, as a science fiction novel, this book has too many failings, and I don't think I will ever pick up another Doctor Who book, even though the used bookstore that I bought it from had a whole bunch of them for sale for $3.49. But if you are a Doctor Who fan, you probably would enjoy this much more than I did. Those are all the print books that I read in August. Let's get on to my Kindle books. I read Orlando by Virginia Woolf. I got interested in this book when I had a guest on my live show. It was Roz at Scaladellian about the books. She mentioned how much she loved Virginia Woolf after we were talking about To the Lighthouse or Mrs. Dalloway, and she mentioned that Orlando was her favorite Virginia Woolf book. And I decided I'm going to read it too, because it's not as complicated and difficult as her stream of consciousness books in To the Lighthouse or Mrs. Dalloway. And I picked up this book, and I read it, and I kind of enjoyed it. It starts off, I believe, in the late 16th century with a young nobleman. And this nobleman turns into a woman and lives the rest of her life as a woman. And this story takes place over hundreds of years. As I said, I think it starts in the late 16th century and takes it up to the modern age when Virginia Woolf was writing. And it discusses women's lives and their relationships in that context. I did not like it so much. I remember liking Mrs. Dalloway more, but I read Mrs. Dalloway way back in the 90s. There was also another commenter on one of the live shows, or someone else who said that Orlando was her least favorite Virginia Woolf book. So there's a lot of difference between them. Some people say it's their favorite Virginia Woolf. Some people say it's their least favorite. I have not read enough Virginia Woolf to make a firm commitment to what I think, although I do think Mrs. Dalloway was the better book. I read a book or a novella for Garbogast. It was called Unhinged by Vera Valentine. It is really only about 89 pages long. It came highly recommended from Dave and Olive at Bookblather, especially Olive, the little dog that likes to read naughty books. And in this one, there is a sentient door that falls in love with a woman who resides in the apartment that he's protecting. It is an erotic novel. It is a strange novel. There is a sexual encounter between a woman and a door. You don't get much weirder than that. But honestly, it was kind of an interesting love story. And yes, it is a love story and an erotic story about a cursed man in a door. I suggest that you can pick it up if you can tolerate this kind of story. Go Down Moses by William Faulkner. Yes, I am holding up the physical copy of this book, even though I read it on my Kindle. I'm just doing that because physical copies are much more interesting to show in video than just the cover, the digital cover. And I read this for Faulkner in August. I am a co-host every August where we read a Faulkner book every year. This is not my favorite Faulkner book. It is a collection of short stories, or some people say it's a collection of short stories that make a novel about growing up in the South. It has a lot to do with hunting and gambling. There's something about Faulkner. He loves to talk about money and business deals. It's a recurring theme. And The Bear is the centerpiece. This is a longer novella of over 100 pages. And I have to say, I was just not in the mood to read The Bear at the time I was reading it. I feel disappointed, but not disappointed in the story. I feel disappointed in myself because I could not get myself into the story and understand truly what Faulkner was writing about. But still, it's Faulkner. It's a good book. And next year, we will be reading Intruder in the Dust. And now on to my audiobooks. I listened to 3 audiobooks from the A Very Short Introduction series. That was Religion by Thomas A. Tweed, Atheism by Julian Buggini, and Blasphemy by Yvonne Sherwood. You'll notice a little bit of a theme in those 3 books. Now, all these 3 books are under 4 hours on audio. These very short introduction books are very good at introducing you to a subject at a high level. You will not get a whole lot of detail on the subject, but they make you conversationally knowledgeable about it. Now, religion, I've read other books of religion that are much more detailed, and this author, Thomas A. Tweed, takes an approach to religion that embraces all types of religion. He does not want to focus just on the Judeo-Christian theories of religion, but what religion might mean to a broader scope of people. I had some issues with some of his definitions and his concepts, but I think it is important for people to look at religion at a much broader scope and take in the vast differences of the many different beliefs that people can have. The same sort of work with atheism. This is a talk about people who are atheists and what atheism means. He takes a broader scope to atheism. He does not necessarily mean that a person who knows there is no God. That would be the hard atheist view. He takes more of an approach of that atheism is people who do not believe in God because there is not enough evidence to believe in God. And this is a very good approach in my mind. Blasphemy was all about blasphemy. What makes blasphemy? This was the weakest of the 3 audiobooks because the author, Yvonne Sherwood, was talking a lot about blasphemy in art. And in the print edition of the book, there were reproductions of some blasphemous artwork. Of course, this was an audio book, so I could not see those pictures. So there was that disadvantage in the audio format. But it's fascinating about what people think of blasphemy. A lot of what she talked about that I really related to was the movie A Life of Brian by Monty Python. A lot of people consider that movie blasphemous. And yes, I guess I always knew that was true, but that is a form of blasphemy. There are many forms of blasphemy in art, but what does it mean to be blasphemous? Is it the person who is interpreting that sees the blasphemy, or is there truly blasphemy in the work of art or literature or film? This author was saying that blasphemy is in the eyes of the beholder, and I really do agree with that. The Daughter of Time by Josephine, a very famous mystery novel in her Inspector Grant series. In this story, Inspector Grant has been injured and laid up in a hospital for a number of weeks with nothing to do. Right off the bat, my question was, why is he in the hospital for a number of weeks with just basically some broken bones? And the thing I came across was, they had better health care back then than we do now. People stayed in hospitals for a lot longer. But Inspector Grant is staying in the hospital. He is bored. He has brought a number of pictures of different faces because Inspector Grant finds faces interesting. And he's looking through these faces that are reproductions and photographs, and he comes across a picture of Richard III. And he knows all about Richard III, or he thinks he does, mostly from Shakespeare, that Richard III was a villain who murdered 2 boys in the Tower. What did Richard III actually commit these murders? And this is Grant investigating history. Why do people believe that Richard III committed these murders? Is there in fact murders, or in fact, were murders actually committed? And this is an historical novel because it's Inspector Grant researching history. What can we learn from history? You may think that a history book is telling the story truthfully, but maybe that person, that historian, is just reproducing what he heard from someone else when you start digging into the sources. An absolutely fascinating mystery book that's very different from most mystery kind of books. I could highly recommend Daughter of Time by Josephine. Island by Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley is more famously known for his fantastic novel, Brave New World. Brave New World is a dystopian novel. It still rings true in many cases for me, reading it earlier in this year, that it's a true dystopia and truly disturbing because, unlike 1984, there are elements in this Brave New World society that still resonate today. Now, Island was Aldous Huxley's last novel, and he wanted to present a utopia. He didn't want to write about a dystopia. So in this novel, a British man conveniently shipwrecks on an isolated island that has this utopian society. There is not a whole lot of character development. There is not a whole lot of plot. It is this British man talking to a number of residents on this island and learning why their island society is a dystopia. I have to say, I do not agree with Aldous Huxley on all his views on what would make a utopia, but it is an interesting counterpoint to Brave New World. If you found Brave New World fascinating, as I did, Island is, as I said, a good counterpoint. This is where Aldous Huxley wanted humanity and civilization to go, learning from Brave New World where that was where we did not want to go. Is Island a great novel? No, I don't think it's a great novel, but it's interesting to think about. The Hungry Gods by Adrian Tchaikovsky, a short little science fiction novel. Adrian Tchaikovsky is probably right now my favorite living science fiction author. And in this story, Earth has had a cataclysm. There are remnants of people running around, and they are living in dire straits. They group into tribes named after animals. You learn about a woman in the rabbit tribe. And her tribe is known as the rabbit tribe because how they deal with the situation, they run away like a rabbit. And then there are the gulls, the seagulls, who steal things. And she has an encounter with some of these gulls, and she has to escape. But then something lands on Earth that has not been around for a very long time, because as Earth was facing this cataclysm, a number of people took off and headed out into space to form a new human civilization in the outer space. But they are coming back to Earth, and they have different ideas about what should be done with the Earth. Some of them think that the world should be inhabited entirely by plants. One other that it should be inhabited by ants. And it is this rabbit woman, along with the gull people and some other people, and one of the rogue elements from this space society who are trying to preserve Earth somewhat as it was in the past. This is not one of my favorite Adrian Tchaikovsky novels. It is a solid and entertaining book. I am glad I listened to it. It does not reduce Tchaikovsky from being one of my favorite science fiction novelists, even though this one was just a little bit disappointing. The Signal by Eric Buchman. This is really more of a radio play rather than a book. You cannot read it in print. You cannot read it in Kindle. As far as I know, it only exists in the audio format. And in this story, there is a radio astronomer, a woman who was disgraced. She used to work for the government, but then she thought there were alien signals coming from outer space until she was proved wrong, and she lost her government job, and now she's enjoying her life as a high school science teacher. But there is something going on that is very strange. The government is shutting down observatories that listen to space, listen for radio signals. And it has been discovered that the government has heard actual alien signals coming from outer space. Or have they? There's a little bit of paranoia, a little bit of conspiracy in this story. And it does end on a very good moral dilemma question. about what a person would do in a complicated situation. I won't tell you what that is. You will have to listen to this story. My wife and I listened to this short audio play while on a drive going out of town for a night. We listened to the first half one day and the second half coming back. It is a good story for those kind of situations where you have about 4 hours to drive. Not a great story, but I can still recommend it. I have been listening to the audio book of A Dance to the Music of Time by Anthony Powell. Yes, again, I am holding up a physical copy of the book, even though I listened to the audio book. This series, A Dance to the Music of Time, contains 12 shortish novels, about 300 pages each. It is sometimes called the equivalent in Britain to A Remembrance of Things Past by Marcel Proust, but unlike Proust, Anthony Powell is understandable. Powell does not dwell too long on minute subjects, and you get characters that you can understand. You can like them or dislike them. Now, again, there's not a whole lot of plot in A Dance to the Music of Time, but there are characters. And this novel, or this contains the first 3 novels in that series, and I listened to the first 2. The first 2 is a question of upbringing, and the second is a buyer's market. There really is no concrete end at the question of upbringing and how it moves into a buyer's market. I think this is really to be considered one ginormous novel, and it depicts British life. Growing up as an Englishman, the author tells the story of a boy, and I think a lot of it must be autobiographical, even though I have not checked. And it starts out when he is in public school, which means in Britain, private school, an elite private school. And then it moves on to his early career as a young man at the end of a question of upbringing and into a buyer's market. Now, curiously enough, I noticed in the first 2 books, the beginning of the first chapter all start with talking about art. I don't know if that will hold to the other books. The audiobook that I have also contains the 3rd book, which would match this book exactly, but I took a little bit of a break after listening to the first 2. In September, I'm definitely going to go on and listen to some more Anthony Powell, and maybe I'll start picking up volumes, or I should say movements 2, 3, and 4, because in this print edition, it's published in 4 volumes. Each volume is called A Movement. I think it could be a very interesting series to continue. Unfortunately, I did DNF a book that I was kind of liking, and that was The Director by Daniel Kehlmann, about the German filmmaker Pabst, who left Germany when Hitler was rising to power because he did not like Hitler that much, and he went to Hollywood to make movies. He made a movie that was a complete and utter flop. And back in those days, if you're a director and you make a flop, you don't get to make more movies. So this Pabst, this director, is persuaded to go back to Germany to make more movies for the Germans. And he has said, you can make any movie you want with no influence from us. Let's just say that Pabst is influenced by Goebbels, the director of propaganda during Hitler's regime, and he's told, you're going to make the movies that we want. And Pabst is going to have to comply. Now, I was sort of in a complicated situation where I could not focus on this book, and it was a library book, and my library here only lets you have a book for 2 weeks, and I held onto that book for a week before starting it, so I had to send it back to the library before finishing it. I do want to finish this book when my mind is better able to focus on it. I will probably get the audiobook version for my second reading of it. Now, I did read some other books in August that are covered by the 2 other videos, the Big Books of Summer and Garbogast Wrap-Up 1. I will just mention the titles here. I will not talk about them, but again, there will be links in the description of this video. In print, I read The Doll Who Ate His Mother by Ramsey Campbell. In audio, I listened to Children of Ruin by Adrian Tchaikovsky. In audio, Minotaur, Milk, and Honey by J.J. Rhymes. On my Kindle, I read Goblin Reader by Mickey Carey. Criminally presents Trash Tales, an anthology of trashy fiction edited by Alex J. Gardner. Run, Spy Run by Nick Carter. That was a print book. And Torment by Hank Johnson, a digital book on my Kindle. So that is everything that I read for the month of August. It comes out to 4,969 pages, a little bit less than last month, but I'm still satisfied with what I read. Thank you for watching, and keep on reading.